She's testing you right now, and you don't even know it. Every woman you've ever been attracted to has deployed psychological warfare tactics that would make military strategists jealous. But here's what she doesn't expect: a man who understands Carl Jung's shadow psychology and uses it to turn her own games against her. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal the 5 Machiavellian rules that separate high-value men from the masses of confused, manipulated males stumbling through modern dating like blind sheep. If you're tired of being played, manipulated, or friend-zoned by women who seem to hold all the cards, smash that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to learn will fundamentally change how you interact with every woman for the rest of your life. The feminine psyche operates on levels most men can't even perceive. Carl Jung discovered that every woman carries within her an animus, a masculine shadow that drives her to test, challenge, and ultimately submit to a man who proves his dominance through psychological mastery, not brute force. This isn't about being cruel or abusive. It's about understanding the ancient dance between masculine and feminine energies that has played out for thousands of years. Most men today are completely unconscious of this dynamic. They react emotionally to every test, every mood swing, every seemingly irrational behavior. They think they're being nice guys when they're actually displaying the psychological patterns of weak, submissive males that trigger a woman's deepest biological disgust. But the man who understands Jung's concepts of the anima and animus, the man who recognizes the shadow games being played, he holds power that transcends physical attraction, money, or status. And if you think this sounds too dark or manipulative, wait until you hear what women actually confess about the men they're most attracted to. It'll shock you. Jung observed that attraction isn't logical, it's archetypal. Every woman is unconsciously searching for her animus, the masculine energy that complements her feminine essence. But here's the cruel irony. The moment a man shows weakness, neediness, or emotional reactivity, he activates her psychological disgust mechanism. She can't help it. It's hardwired into her evolutionary psychology. The first Machiavellian rule emerges from this understanding: never react emotionally to her tests. When she's being difficult, moody, or seemingly irrational, she's not actually upset about whatever she claims to be upset about. She's testing your emotional stability, your masculine frame, your ability to remain centered while she spirals into feminine chaos. This is her unconscious way of determining if you're strong enough to be her psychological anchor. Most men fail this test spectacularly. They get defensive. They try to logic her out of her emotions, they apologize for things they didn't do, or they get angry and reactive. Every single one of these responses confirms to her unconscious mind that you're not the dominant masculine energy she's seeking. You've revealed yourself to be just another weak male who can be controlled through emotional manipulation. But the high-value man, he remains unmoved. He observes her emotional storm with the detached curiosity of a scientist studying a fascinating natural phenomenon. He doesn't take her emotions personally because he understands they're not really about him. They're about her unconscious need to test his psychological strength. This leads us to the second Machiavellian rule, and this one will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about women's behavior. Use strategic indifference as your most powerful weapon. Jung wrote extensively about the concept of psychological types and how opposite types are mysteriously drawn to each other. The feminine psyche is naturally chaotic, emotional, and relationship-focused. What drives her absolutely wild with desire is encountering masculine energy that is ordered, logical, and seemingly indifferent to her emotional manipulations. When you stop chasing her validation, when you stop trying to make her happy, when you stop reacting to her moods, something profound happens in her unconscious mind. She begins to perceive you as a challenge, as someone who exists independent of her emotional world. This triggers what Jung called the transcendent function, her psyche's desperate attempt to unite with the opposing masculine energy you represent. But here's where most men screw this up completely. They think indifference means being cold or cruel. That's amateur hour. Let me show you the difference between toxic indifference and strategic psychological positioning. Strategic indifference isn't about being mean or ignoring her completely. It's about maintaining your own psychological center regardless of her emotional weather patterns. When she's happy, you don't get swept up in her euphoria. When she's angry, you don't get dragged into her drama. You remain consistently yourself. Interested but not needy, caring but not desperate, present but not dependent on her for your emotional state. This psychological positioning triggers something primal in her unconscious mind. She begins to see you as what Jung called a self-realized individual, someone who has integrated their opposite psychological functions and achieved a level of wholeness that most people never reach. This is incredibly rare and incredibly attractive to the feminine psyche, which is constantly seeking completion through union with balanced masculine energy. The third Machiavellian rule builds on this foundation. Master the art of psychological mirroring. Jung discovered that we're all carrying around unconscious psychological material, our shadow, that we project onto others. Every woman you meet is unconsciously projecting her ideal masculine archetype onto you, testing to see if you'll live up to it or crumble under the pressure. Most men try to be what they think she wants them to be. They become chameleons, changing their personality based on her reactions, desperately trying to maintain her approval. This is psychological suicide. The moment you start adapting yourself to fit her projections, you've revealed that you don't have a solid sense of self, and nothing dries up feminine attraction faster than a man without a defined identity. But here's the Machiavellian twist. Instead of trying to be what she wants, you reflect back to her what she needs to see about herself. When she's being dramatic, you remain calm and force her to confront her own chaos. When she's being manipulative, you don't get angry. You simply withdraw your attention and energy, making her face the consequences of her behavior. This is what Jung called holding space for someone's psychological growth. You're not trying to fix her or change her. You're creating a psychological container strong enough to hold her feminine energy while she works through her own internal contradictions. This positions you as the mature, centered, masculine presence that her unconscious mind recognizes as worthy of respect and desire. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because once you understand this dynamic, you'll start seeing it everywhere. The most attractive men aren't the ones trying to please women. They're the ones who make women confront their own psychological patterns. The fourth Machiavellian rule is perhaps the most counterintuitive. Embrace your own shadow and become psychologically dangerous. Jung spent decades studying what he called the shadow, all the parts of ourselves that we've repressed or denied. Most men today have been conditioned to suppress their natural masculine aggression, their competitive instincts, their desire for dominance and control. They think this makes them good guys, but it actually makes them psychologically neutered and deeply unattractive to feminine energy. Women are unconsciously attracted to men who have integrated their shadow, men who are capable of both protection and destruction, who can be both gentle and ruthless depending on what the situation requires. This doesn't mean being abusive or violent. It means being psychologically complete, owning all aspects of your masculine nature instead of trying to be some sanitized version of manhood. The high-value man understands that he must be what Jung called amoral, beyond conventional notions of good and evil, operating from a place of authentic power rather than people-pleasing weakness. He's not trying to be liked by everyone because he understands that true respect comes from being feared as much as loved. He's psychologically dangerous because he's unpredictable, because he won't compromise his values for temporary comfort, because he's willing to walk away from anyone who doesn't add value to his life. This psychological dangerousness creates what Jung termed numinous attraction, a mysterious, almost spiritual pull that transcends ordinary sexual chemistry. Women can sense when a man has done the psychological work to integrate his shadow, and they find this level of authentic masculine power irresistible. When you stop trying to be safe and start embracing your natural masculine edge, you'll notice women responding to you differently. They'll test you more intensely at first, trying to see if your dangerous energy is real or just an act. But once they confirm that you're genuinely operating from integrated masculine power, their behavior toward you will shift dramatically. But here's what separates the truly powerful men from the pretenders, and this might be the most important distinction you ever learn about masculine psychology. The fifth and final Machiavellian rule synthesizes everything we've discussed. Operate from outcome independence while maintaining strategic objectives. This is the ultimate expression of what Jung called psychological sovereignty, the ability to pursue your goals without being emotionally attached to specific results. Most men are outcome dependent when it comes to women. They need her to respond positively. They need her to validate their attractiveness. They need her to choose them over other men. This neediness creates what Jung identified as psychological inflation, an unconscious belief that your self-worth depends on external validation. Women can smell this desperation from miles away, and it triggers their natural instinct to reject weak masculine energy. The high-value man understands that he's running a long-term strategic campaign, not reacting to short-term emotional fluctuations. He has clear objectives. He knows what kind of relationship he wants, what standards he won't compromise, what behavior he will and won't tolerate. But he holds these objectives lightly, without the desperate attachment that characterizes weak masculine energy. This creates what Jung called psychological magnetism. When you're genuinely indifferent to whether any particular woman chooses you, when you're operating from abundance rather than scarcity, when you're more committed to your own psychological development than to winning her approval, you become irresistibly attractive to high-quality feminine energy. She can sense that you're not trying to complete yourself through her, that you're already psychologically whole and are simply choosing to share your energy with her. This transforms the entire dynamic, from you chasing her validation to her competing for your continued interest and investment. But here's where most men who learn these concepts make a critical error. They think this is about manipulation or control. They try to use these psychological insights as tricks or techniques to get women to behave the way they want. This completely misses the point and will ultimately backfire because it's still coming from a place of neediness and attachment to outcomes. Jung emphasized that true psychological development requires what he called individuation, the process of becoming a complete, integrated human being who doesn't need external validation to feel whole. The Machiavellian rules I've shared aren't manipulation tactics. They're the natural behavioral expressions of a man who has done the inner work to develop genuine psychological sovereignty. When you truly understand your own worth, when you've integrated your shadow and become comfortable with your own psychological dangerousness, when you've developed the ability to remain centered regardless of external circumstances, these behaviors emerge naturally. You don't have to remember to be indifferent or strategically position yourself psychologically. You simply are these things because you've evolved beyond the psychological neediness that characterizes most modern men. This is why Jung insisted that the path to authentic power begins with self-knowledge, not techniques for controlling others. The man who tries to use these concepts as manipulation tools is still operating from a weak psychological position. He's still trying to get something from women rather than offering something valuable to them. And this brings us to the most powerful realization of all, one that will completely change how you see every interaction with women from this moment forward. The truly high-value man understands that his relationship with women is a reflection of his relationship with his own inner feminine, what Jung called the anima. Every woman you encounter is showing you aspects of your own unconscious feminine energy. The women who trigger you, who manipulate you, who drive you crazy with their emotional games, they're revealing parts of your own psyche that you haven't yet integrated. This is why the men who are most successful with women are often the ones who have spent years studying psychology, philosophy, and their own inner landscape. They understand that external relationships are mirrors of internal psychological dynamics. When you've done the work to understand and integrate your own feminine side, you naturally know how to interact with women in ways that create attraction and respect, rather than manipulation and resentment. The Machiavellian approach isn't about conquering women, it's about conquering yourself. It's about developing such a deep understanding of human psychology that you can navigate complex social and romantic dynamics with the skill of a master strategist. You're not trying to hurt or control anyone, you're simply operating from a level of psychological sophistication that most people never develop. This is what Jung meant when he wrote about the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposing psychological forces in creative tension rather than being torn apart by internal contradictions. The high-value man can be both gentle and firm, both loving and detached, both engaged and independent. He's not trying to be one thing or another. He's psychologically flexible enough to respond appropriately to whatever situation presents itself. Women are naturally drawn to this kind of psychological complexity because it mirrors their own internal landscape. The feminine psyche is naturally paradoxical. She wants security and excitement, predictability and surprise, closeness and independence. The man who can navigate these contradictions with grace and understanding becomes incredibly valuable to her unconscious mind. But this level of psychological development requires years of dedicated inner work. You have to be willing to confront your own shadow, to examine your deepest fears and insecurities, to develop genuine self-awareness rather than just learning surface-level techniques for attracting women. The path Jung outlined isn't easy, but it's the only path that leads to genuine psychological power and authentic relationships. Most men spend their entire lives reacting to women's behavior without ever understanding the deeper psychological dynamics at play. They get stuck in cycles of attraction and rejection, never realizing that they're playing a game with rules they don't understand. But once you begin to see these patterns clearly, once you understand the archetypal forces that drive human attraction and repulsion, you gain access to a level of social and romantic intelligence that gives you tremendous advantages. You stop taking women's behavior personally because you understand the unconscious psychological forces that drive their actions. You stop trying to change or fix women because you understand that their tests and challenges are actually opportunities for you to demonstrate your psychological strength. Most importantly, you stop seeking validation from women because you've developed the internal psychological resources to validate yourself. This transforms every interaction from a desperate attempt to win approval into a sophisticated dance between complementary energies. You're no longer trying to get something from her. You're offering something valuable and seeing if she's Sophisticated enough to recognize and appreciate it. This shift in perspective changes everything. Instead of being reactive and needy, you become creative and strategic. Instead of being emotionally dependent on her responses, you become genuinely curious about the psychological dynamics at play. Instead of trying to force outcomes, you create conditions that allow natural attraction and respect to emerge. Jung called this process active imagination, the ability to consciously participate in the unconscious psychological processes that normally operate outside of awareness. When you develop this skill in the context of romantic relationships, you become capable of creating profound connections based on genuine psychological compatibility rather than superficial attraction or desperate neediness. The men who master these psychological principles don't just become more successful with women, they become more successful in every area of life. The same psychological sovereignty that makes you attractive to high-quality women also makes you more effective in business, more respected by other men, more capable of leadership and influence in any social context. This is because the principles we've discussed, emotional stability, strategic thinking, outcome independence, shadow integration, and psychological flexibility are the foundations of all genuine power and influence. When you develop these qualities authentically, not as manipulation techniques, but as expressions of your evolved psychological development, you naturally command respect and attraction wherever you go. But remember, this is a lifelong journey, not a quick fix. Jung spent decades developing his understanding of human psychology, and he continued growing and learning until the day he died. The path of psychological development doesn't have an endpoint. It's a continuous process of becoming more conscious, more integrated, more authentically yourself.